I know a lot
Sure.
of people out there who are brimming with bold ideas and are ready to launch their ventures. But before we hit the gas, let's talk about some basics. Okay. So, Abubakar, what are some key factors young entrepreneurs should focus on in their early stages?
So, to be really honest, right? Like, I can give you an answer from both an entrepreneur side and as a investment side, right? Like what we look for in entrepreneurs and what I've tried and what I failed at multiple times as well, right? So when I was in university, I've tried starting up a bunch of things, failed a couple of times. And what a lot of people don't tell you is that a lot of people around you won't be honest with you, right? They listen to your ideas and they listen to all of these, how you're going to execute your grand vision. And the first thing they'll say is like, this is such a good idea, right? This is beautiful. This is so imaginative. This is so creative. What people often don't like to hear is criticism, right? So I think like a very important factor, which I think would have played a significantly different role if I had that around me. People who criticized my idea, people who gave me constructive criticism, not criticism in the sense of like, you are terrible, you are this thing, you're not good enough. Not like that sort of criticism. Have you thought about this? Maybe this won't work in this market. Maybe you're thinking a little too much. Maybe your analysis of the market isn't accurate enough. So you want to find people who are able to give you constructive criticism, people who are ready to say that this is not the right thing to do. This is the right thing to do. Maybe you should look into this. That is probably step one. Step two is for every business, you can get many sources of funding because funding's primary, right? No matter if you have the best idea in the world or even the worst idea in the world, you won't be able to know whether you have the best or the worst idea unless you have some money to experiment with. And for a lot of us, at least for me, I didn't have a lot of money to begin with, right? So you go on this exercise, creating pitch decks and going to investors and investors and investors and trying to raise money, which about 95 to 99% of the companies won't get a shot at, right? 95 to 99% of the companies won't get funded. And the reason is that as an investor, you don't want to give your money to somebody random, right? You want to give your money to somebody who's proven, who has some traction in the market, and somebody who can come and say that, yes, I've done this much. This is how much you will get back in this many years. So from an investment point of view, it doesn't make sense for me, an investor, to randomly give money to every Tom, Dick, and Harry. It makes more sense for me to give a little bit of money to a very stable, very proven entrepreneur. So that is why if you see the trends, right, you'll see second-time entrepreneurs, people who are starting their second business after their first successful exit, they tend to raise more money compared to first-time founders or even young founders, as a matter of fact. So when you're starting out, So when you're starting out, when it comes to funding, you probably want to try and save your own money, make your own money. If you're working, use your salary. If you're not working, try some freelance gigs, make up your own money. That is the best way, because when you lose your money, there's nobody you have to answer to, right? You took a risk at work. You also there is this concept in finance called risk tolerance, right? You are less tolerant towards losing your own money. When it's somebody else's money, you don't really value it nearly as much. So you will take more decisive, more concise and more conservative decisions when it's your own money. But on the other hand, let's say you don't have enough money on your own. The next immediate people you want to ideally reach out to is your family. Like, your family can be your biggest supporters, but also sometimes can be your biggest downfall. If you have loving family like mine, which is I'm hoping most of you, if you have a really loving family, your loving family is not going to tell that your idea is terrible. Your loving family is never going to come to a state and say like, this is not a good idea, you should not do it. Your family is always going to be supportive, and that can be a good and a bad thing. So when you're asking them for a little bit of money, that's a good thing. It's nice to know that somebody's behind you and supporting you. But when you ask them for a larger amount, you tend to have a very biased understanding of what the risk tolerance is for your family and for yourself. So I would say get initial funding from your family, but you want to go one step further as well. One step further is, I would say, is your friends. Like these are people who support you, but they can call a spade, right? They can say like this is a bad idea to your face, and they don't mean it in a very harsh manner. So that is, I would say, your initial round of people, you, your family, and your friends. And if you can build something with the money that you can make out of yourself, your family, and friends, I think that is usually enough money to test things out. And if that tests prove that you are not in the right track, then that is a good enough time to, abandon the project. The biggest problem I would say a lot of founders have is not know when to abandon project. They're like, you know what, I spent 6 months on this. Maybe I should go another month. And you're burning money and money and money and wasting your time. And to know when it's not worth it is very important. And when you have very limited amount and when you can build something, you will know when it is successful or not, because you have a limited runway. You don't have infinite runway when you're asking money from your family and friends. So these are probably like the two important things. Surround yourself with people who are ready to give you constructive criticism, and always manage your cash flow.
Okay, that's super valuable, especially for our audience here in India. So my next question is, we've got a lot of creative minds, but sometimes the resources can feel limited. What are some creative ways to launch a startup without breaking the bank?
Look, if I have to be honest, right? Depending on which country you are. So if I'm in Dubai, it's significantly harder compared to in US. If I'm in India, it's significantly harder to start something compared to being in the US or one of these developed nations. The thing is, resources are limited when you're in India. Resources are limited when you're in the UAE. Resources are not as limited when you're in the US, right? So there is nothing inherently wrong about being in India or the UAE, and there's nothing inherently amazing about being in US or Europe or UK or one of these countries, right? What you have to understand is that you have to understand what your idea is, right? What is the essence of the idea? What problem are you trying to solve? And you have to figure out what is the easiest and the cheapest and the cost-efficient manner in which I can solve this problem. So, and this is like the most universal application of it, right? No matter which country you are, no matter how much resources you have to figure out what is the cheapest way to solve this problem. A good example is like a basic delivery service, right? Like a grocery delivery service. So, for example, yes, you can build an amazing application. You can build an amazing AI engine for it to sort of categorize different things. You can build amazing technology. But at the core of it, if it's just a delivery application, do you really need that to solve the problem at the beginning, right? Can you solve this problem by hiring a few people to buy and give things, right? Do you really need that insane amount of technology to get into the market? So you want to find the cheapest way to get into the market. So you have to look at your idea. There is a lot of ideas around, right? So you can also kind of break your ideas into two types of categories. One is something that is R&D oriented, and one is fixing immediate problems. Now, if you take a delivery application or a delivery service, it's a fixing an immediate problem kind of a business idea. You can immediately solve the problem at a much significantly cheaper cost. But if it's like an AI chatbot or like you're building something like ChatGPT from scratch, there is literally no way where you can do that without breaking your bank. Correct? So you have to take a very bold and decisive call and decide whether this is going to break your bank or not. And if it is going to break your bank and you don't have the bank to back it, you probably shouldn't pursue it. Like, there is literally no reason. A lot of people will be like, you can try this, try that. The honest truth is, like, if it's going to break your bank and if it's an R&D focused project, like ChatGPT or complex AI algorithms, extremely complex machine learning algorithms, like NLP projects. Like these are things that require a lot of money and a lot of funding to be constantly developed to be at a good state. So if you have an idea that is that, you don't have the money to back it up, you don't have funding to back it up, that is unfortunately not a good idea, right? So you want to, initial step is that you want to project into whether it's an R&D project or is it a market problem, market fixing project, right? If it's a market fixing project, find the cheapest way to get to it. Like even if you have to, like again, the delivery service, right? Even if you don't have money, you just want to prove that you have, you yourself go out, get the items and deliver it to your customers. The idea is not about making profit in the beginning. The idea is to validate whether a problem exists. If there are 15 delivery applications, you don't belong in the market unless you're bringing something to the table, right? So you want to first validate it. Validating is going to cost a little bit. It's either going to cost you money or it's going to cost you time or it's going to cost you both, right? So it's better to do it yourself, like directly deal with the customer, directly deal with the suppliers and get it done that way, right? That is the only thing. But if you don't have money, don't even think about an R&D project.
Okay. As you said, you have a background in both finance and also in tech. So for a new business venture, what are the initial considerations you think are there around funding? Do we always need to raise funds before launching, or are there any alternative approaches? Let's say we do require some funding.
Is it? Okay. So first thing first is one, not everybody needs funding. All right. That is step one, right? When you go out and ask people for money, you need to have a justification for why you need funding and how you're going to use it. All right. You think about it this way, right? You can think about it in a way that if I give, let's say you're building something, right? Let's say you're building an application called X or Y, XY. All right.
Yeah.
If I give you 10 dirhams or 10, if I give you 100 rupees, for example, all right, is it going to change it in any way? Right? Is the application going to change in any significant manner? Right? That is a question. Right? It's not always a no, it's always not always an yes. It's a very situation by situation basis. If 100 rupees is going to change that application significantly, then you go out and raise 100 rupees. Okay? If it not change it significantly, how much money does it require to change it significantly? Sometimes it's 1,000 rupees, sometimes it's 10,000 rupees, 1 lakh rupees. It doesn't, right? It doesn't end there. It's a case by case basis. So you have to first identify how much money do you really require for it to have a significant change. Okay. But for a significant change to happen, you have something called a pilot product or an MVP of sorts.
Yeah.
Right. Now, this MVP is a very tricky situation, right? If you are from a tech background, and I'm going to assume that this is a tech startup to begin with. If you're from a tech background, things are a little easier. You can develop the app yourself. If you don't know the programming languages, for you with tech background, it's going to be significantly easier to learn how to develop applications compared to somebody who's coming from a business or a marketing background. So that is one thing, right? You always want to have the skill in-house, right? Some skill in-house, maybe not the extensive of it, but some skill in-house. So if you're not a IT person or a tech person, you need to go find a co-founder who's a tech founder, right? And this is where the co-founders make a lot of difference. So if you're not a marketing person, get a person who is a marketing co-founder, right? So you want to find these key co-founders. A lot of times what happens is people go into business with people with similar skills. So a tech guy will go with business with somebody in tech. A marketing person would go to business with somebody in marketing. And that is often a catastrophic thing, because what happens is that there is no room for other skills.
Yeah, exactly.
So you want to avoid that. So the easiest way and the cheapest way to make sure something happens is get a good co-founder. Once you have a really good co-founder, what you do is you build the MVP. Now, this MVP, you have to build it again, coming back to the cheapest way possible to solve that problem. You don't have to have every single feature You don't have to have every single functionality. It doesn't have to be polished. You just want to show that there is a market for this. That is the entire idea of an MVP. So when you come to the MVP stage is where you typically need the most amount of money, because that is where you want to do significant amount of cases to go into the market. For that, there are a couple of ways. Again, you go to your friends and family, which is the most easiest and the most least painless way, I would say, right? But sometimes, don't happen, right? Your friends and family may not have. The next stage you want to look at is for angel investors, right? And this, all the time you go into your VCs and everything, you want to look for angel investors, somebody who can take a bigger risk on you, right? And a lot of times, compared to what you're saying, like depending on which country you are and everything, you might not find an angel investor, okay, which is fine. If you don't find an angel investor, what you have to do is you have to look for some sort of a crowdfunding option. There are things like Kickstarters and Indiegogo, and depending on different countries, there are different initiatives from it as well. So you want to look for crowdfunding. But then much, much, much easier method is looking for incubators and accelerators, right? These incubators and accelerators are like programs typically by private entities or sometimes even government. So this is not a political take, but the Indian government has some incubators and accelerators within some regions of India. If you're part of a university, you're typically, if it's like IITs and IIMs, they typically have an accelerator. Or if you don't have an accelerator, if you're in university, you don't have an accelerator, look at how accelerators work and bring them to your university. That gives you enough experience on how to manage different things. So incubators and accelerators in India, there's plenty, honestly. So you can just search for incubators, accelerators in India, you'll get a full list. There are websites like F6S and all these things where you can search for these things. These are another foolproof way to get some funding. And more important than funding at an early startup is the support. People who can, again, I'm just going back to it, people who can give you constructive criticism. Because people who say, there are three types of people, I would say, right? One type of people, like they support you no matter what. That's bad influence, right? Especially when you're starting a company. There are some people who give you nothing but negative comments, right? Everywhere you look, they give you just negative comments. That is also very bad influence, because that is not what you want in the beginning. You want people who care about you, who care about the project, and who tell you to look at the right places. That's the type of people you want. And a lot of times people fail because they don't have that people around. So you want going to an incubator and accelerator is one way to find out people. If you're going the crowdfunding route, the advantage of crowdfunding is that it's a bunch of people giving you money. So not only you're getting money in the process, you're also kind of validating the market in the process. If people are giving you some money, like trusting a random stranger and giving money to, do their own, do their company, build their business, all these things, it's because they have such a problem that they're willing to give you money in advance to, let you build a product. A good example of it is Tesla, for example. It's not a startup, but you think of Tesla, right? Tesla doesn't even sell the car. They take a small down payment for years and years and years. So for the Cybertruck, they had like a down payment for 2 years, I think. 2 years, they just down payment. These are people who believe in Elon and they just give money, right? And basically what Elon got was like an interest-free loan for 2 years. But Elon didn't just get interest-free loan for 2 years. What he also got was the market validation that these many people want a Cybertruck. Even though it's the ugliest looking truck in the world, people want this thing. That is good enough market validation. So now he can go in to his shareholders and say, look, we need to allocate this much of amount to the Cybertruck so that we can build it. The same kind of concept applies for a startup. If thousands and thousands and thousands of people believe in what you're building and give you money, you're not just getting money, you're also getting the market validation for it. So step one, just to rephrase it, level one financing is that you get it from yourself. Level two is friends and family. Level three is probably angels or crowdfunding, or you go to accelerators and incubators.
Interesting. The reason why I ask you this question is because we usually hear that majority of the businesses don't need any hefty capital upfront, right? And can start with zero or low capital. But certain businesses do need initial capital, like they might need to set up a manufacturing plant, or they might need some types of equipment or machinery, which are quite expensive, and not everyone's startups are tech startups. They can be different, like brick and mortar restaurants requiring initial lease space and kitchen equipment, or certain service-based businesses needing licenses and software subscriptions. So that's why I
Correct.
asked you.
Not just that, like even if you're not a tech startup, let's say you're starting up a restaurant, right? Like the most okay, let's take two examples, right? You take a restaurant and you take a tech startup, like a marketing agency kind of a company. Okay, in theory, you don't need a lot of money to start, right? The problem is, no matter what company you are, basic things you will require, right? You will require an accounting software. You will require something to like a CRM or a CRM tool, right? You will require an email subscription, right? You can't start anything with absolute zero, right? You have to kind of analysis of like how much capital do you want upfront? Can I start with like $10 in my pocket, or do I really, really, really need a lot of money? And that depends from business to business. There is no scenario in which you can start anything with $0. You will see if you go on like your TikToks and Instagrams and things, you will see a lot of these people like come up on your feed saying like you can do this side hustle and make the $100,000, make this much amount of money. The problem with all those things, like by the time you get to those information, like by the time you get to know that something like this exists, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people have already signed up for that, are still already doing that. So by the time you enter into the market, it is already a saturated market. So the chances of you making $100,000 figure, like the TikTok guy promises you, is like very marginal. Like there is like 1 in 1,000% chance, 1 in 1,000 chance, or 1 in 2,000 chance that you actually make that much amount of money. You might be successful, but there is a very, very, very marginal amount of like chances that you would make that amount in your business. So you always want to be, prudent and cautious about people who say that you can start everything with $0. You can start this for the cheapest way. This is the free way to make thousands and thousands of dollars. Anytime somebody says that, you want to be very careful about it. You want to do your market analysis. Just because a bunch of people push it, just because a bunch of people tell you it's the right thing, is never the right thing to do. So that is also one more thing. When we get into more complex things, right, like a restaurant or a manufacturing plant and everything, this is when you need a lot of capital upfront. You don't want to listen to people. You want to listen to data. You want to go out there, connect either primary or secondary research. You want to do the research yourself. You don't want to rely on like a report by HSBC or report by the ICICI or one of these banks. You don't want to rely on reports. You want to rely on data, like raw data that you want to put it out and say that if the market is shifting like this, how much money can I make? What is my TAM?
TAM, or total addressable market, is the total money you could make yearly if everyone who could buy your product did so. It's like the maximum amount of sales a business could make if it reaches everyone who wants its product or service. It's like imagining that everyone who could use your product does. This gives you an idea of the full potential of your market. For example, if you are selling a new kind of bicycle, your TAM would be all the people in the world who might want to buy a bicycle. But remember, it's just a theoretical maximum. In reality, not everyone will buy your bicycle because of factors like competition, price, and individual preferences. So, while TAM is a useful concept, it's also important to be realistic about your actual market potential. If you find this podcast interesting, hit that subscribe button so you never miss any Wisdom Bites wisdom. And check out Abubakr's podcast show on YouTube. It's The Dollar Diaries.
You want to find out how much is your total market worth. You want to find out how much is your serviceable market worth. How much of the serviceable market that you can realistically obtain. You want to do this data analysis yourself. You don't want to outsource it to somebody's third-party reports. You don't want to outsource it to somebody. You don't want to outsource it to some news report. Every morning, if you open up Financial Times, right? Every morning you will see a report that says, this market is worth this much, this market is worth this much, this market is worth this much. In reality, that is like if you have a $2 billion market for restaurants, that doesn't mean you should enter into restaurants. You want to look into your context. If you are living in, let's say, in the middle of nowhere, in somewhere in Uttar Pradesh, right? You're living in Uttar Pradesh, in the middle of nowhere in a village. Just because the restaurant is a $2 billion market doesn't mean you open a Michelin-star restaurant in the middle of nowhere in a village in Uttar Pradesh, right? So you want to take context to data. You want to add your own context. You want to analyze your data and see whether this is a worth endeavor or not. Is this worth my time? Is this my capital? And you want to do that analysis use.
Interesting. I got it. So just now you talked about some funding options, right? What are the different funding options are there? You talked about crowdfunding and bootstrapping. Now, once again, can you just tell me all the different options, what we can do?
Alex, so let's split it up, right? The first thing you want to do is...
I'll tell you. Firstly, you need to make sure that you have the money. Step 2, you go to your parents, family, uncles, aunts, or cousins. Step 3, you go to your friends. Step 4, you look for crowdfunding. Step 5, you can look for some accelerators and incubators. Step 6, go look for some angel investors. If you find this podcast interesting, hit that subscribe button so you never miss any Wisdom Bites wisdom. And check out Abubakr's podcast show on YouTube. It's The Dollar Diaries.
You shouldn't think about venture capital or private equity or any of these things until you're a well-off company. You are like past a certain stage. You go to venture capitals and private equities. You go to venture capitals when you're at least in Series A. You go to private equity when you're looking to exit the company. A lot of people don't understand this. They think like, oh, I'll go, this is a private equity, this is a VC. You should never, ever, ever, ever look for a VC. Right? If you're starting a business, never look for a VC. In fact, if you ask me, you should never look at an angel investor until it's absolute dire. Right? To test your concepts, you never, ever, ever go to an investor.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? So these are your options for funding.
Okay, what about government schemes and initiatives and grants which are provided by government of like in my country, India? What do you think about it? Should we take as an initial point?
Yes, you should always make use of it if it is available. And look, especially in countries like India, right, there is a lot of competition. You won't easily get the grants, right? And that is a good thing, right? If there is a government backing for your project, that is a very good thing. It's going to make your entire funding process for the rest of the company's history very, very, very easy, right? So if there is a government funding option available, government grants and schemes, typically these are the non-commitment schemes, right? Typically, the government doesn't ask for equity in the company. The government doesn't ask for this thing. It's typically like I'll give you money and no questions asked kind of a deal in most cases, right? So if it is that kind of thing, just take the money. Never, never, never think twice about it. If apply for this, if you get it, well and good, all good. Take the money, use it, build something amazing.
Okay, let's say if I want to start a factory and I do need some sort of equipments or like manufacturing like equipments and other stuff. So should I opt for loans or micro loans, or should I reach out to any manufacturing like businessmen and ask to join us in our like be a partner in our company? What would be the better option?
Look, if you're building something that requires extensive amount of money, right, like a manufacturing plant, for example, which requires a lot of machinery. If you don't have the money, you want to be 100% sure that this is worth something you're doing. Okay, you have to be 100% sure before you reach out to anybody. You have to be 110% sure whether this is worth it. Okay, when you're 110% sure it's worth it, you look for financing options. All right. The easiest method is you look for existing players in the market and see if you can sort of lease or rent their facility. The often most underlooked financing option is renting, right? You think about renting and leasing, you don't really think about it as like, oh, this is a financing option. In reality, leasing and renting is the easiest and the most important financing option. If you can't lease and rent, then you look at for like a loans. All right. And when you're taking a loan, you want to be 120% sure that this is worth it. Because not only you're taking money from the banks, no bank is going to give you a loan without an interest. Right. And you want to be sure it is worth paying that interest, right? You're taking a risk and you're paying a premium for that money. Is it really worth it? And with a lot of cultures and a lot of religions, interest is forbidden in a lot of religions and a lot of cultures. So in that case, also want to take an ethical approach to it. Is it really right for me to pay interest? Is it like, am I personally okay with paying interest? Is something you want to be okay with? Now, if you take my case, I don't want to pay interest, right? And that is a personal thing to me. So I would never think of going to a bank and taking a loan. But if you are okay with paying interest, and if you are okay with paying a premium for it, and you think it is 110% guarantee that it will succeed, then yeah, go on and take a loan. But the problem with loan versus other type of financing, like equity-based financing, is that when your business runs into a loss, the shareholders also run into a loss. So what happens is, and the investor have a shared goal of making sure that this business doesn't fail, right? Which is with any sort of loans. For a bank, it doesn't matter where you fail. It doesn't matter whether you succeed. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter what the economy is like. It doesn't matter that your suppliers have increased the price and you're making a loss. It doesn't matter your customers are not returning. It doesn't matter. And nothing matters to them as long as they're getting their payments on time. Right? And very, 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 very dangerous place to be in. Right? Because you can predict, you can put it on an Excel sheet and predict that month 1, I'm going to make this much money. Month 2, I can make this much money. Month 3, I can make this much money. Month 4, I can make this much money. What happens is day after tomorrow, let's say you are in like manufacturing business, right? Day after tomorrow, there is a small conflict in the Middle East, oil prices rise up. All your calculations and analysis and months of Excel preparations gone to waste because oil prices have increased and your suppliers increased. What can you do? Nothing. It's not in your hand, right? All these 3-year predictions, 4-year predictions, nothing matters because the world's not at your fingertips. You don't control the world. So in this case, if you're taking an interest, you're taking a massive risk. So you want to be 110% sure. You want to make sure your suppliers won't screw you. You want to make sure your customers will come back to you. You want to make sure your customers will pay the premium that you're putting on the product or the service, right? So you want to be 120% sure before you take a bank loan or any sort of microfinancing options. A biggest pitfall, right? And people don't realize it. There are a lot of buy now, pay later sort of options in India, right? You will buy like something like for 400 rupees and you will pay 100 rupees over the next 4 months. It seems very tempting. But if you see the data, right, there are so many people who are committing suicide and everything because what happens is all these companies are like shaming these people who are not paying it. It's kind of like a thing you become ashamed of that you didn't pay your dues on time and everything. And people are like, really committing suicide over this. So these are not easy things. Money is a very sensitive topic. So you should never be like, yeah, you know what, I will buy this, I will invest, put 400 rupees on my accounting software, I will pay 100 rupees for the next 4 months. You will never know what happens in the third month. You might lose your job, you might have a sudden emergency. You will never know. The life's not in your control, right? So you want to be a million times sure before you opt for these predatory, I call them very predatory in nature, right? They're out to get you, right? So, sort of financing. Avoid that as much as possible. You don't want to be in a place where tomorrow morning something happens to you, you're completely ruined, right? That is one place you want to be out. No business, no idea is worth your health. It's not worth your mental health, physical health, and it's not worth losing your dignity over. So I personally, I'm very against bank loans and all these alternate financing methods. But if you're 1,000% sure about your business idea, you know for a fact nothing is going to happen, and you're ready to take that risk, you can apply for it.